Penny Calloway clutched her worn leather-bound journal to her chest, standing frozen at the edge of Willow Creek's dusty Main Street as whispers circled around her like autumn leaves. It was 1875 in the Montana Territory, and at 22 she'd learned that whispers could cut deeper than any knife. Especially when they were about her. "She's too plain," the dressmaker's wife said, not bothering to lower her voice as Penny passed the shop. "Poor thing doesn't stand a chance with all these pretty young things coming in on the stage." Penny kept her chin up, though her heart sank. She hadn't come to this frontier town to find a husband. She'd come because her uncle had died, leaving her his small newspaper, the Willow Creek Chronicle. As the only living relative with any education to speak of, she'd left her position as a schoolteacher in Philadelphia to take over the business. She hurried past the general store, the whispers following her like shadows. Her simple brown dress hung straight on her slight frame, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun. No curls, no frills, no fancy ribbons or lace, just Penny, as plain as her name suggested. The newspaper office was a small wooden building with faded paint and a crooked sign. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light coming through the windows. The printing press sat in the corner, a hulking iron beast that Penny had yet to master. Papers were scattered everywhere, and the desk was stacked with letters and notes her uncle had never gotten around to sorting. She sighed, setting her journal down and rolling up her sleeves. This was her life now. The bell above the door jingled, and Penny turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the bright sunlight. Miss Calloway. The man's voice was deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as not from these parts originally. "Yes," she squinted, unable to make out his features. He stepped inside, removing his hat. "Tucker Easton, madam. I worked for your uncle, helping with the printing and deliveries." Penny felt relief wash over her. Her uncle had mentioned Tucker in his letters. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the ends. His blue eyes were direct and clear, his jaw strong beneath a few days' worth of stubble. He wore simple clothes, a faded blue shirt, worn denim pants, and scuffed boots, but there was something undeniably striking about him. "Mr. Easton, I'm so glad you're here. I was beginning to think I'd have to figure out that printing press all on my own." He smiled, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Call me Tucker, please, and that old press has a temperament meaner than a wounded cougar. Your uncle was the only one who could sweet-talk it into behaving." For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, Penny felt herself relax slightly. "Well, I hope you can teach me its language because we have an edition to put out by the end of the week." Tucker set his hat on a hook by the door. "I reckon we can manage that, Miss Calloway. Penny, please." He nodded, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or simply recognition of two people who didn't quite fit the town's expectations. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Tucker would arrive early, bringing coffee from the hotel kitchen where he had an arrangement with the cook. They'd plan the newspaper contents, and he'd show her how to set the type, one painstaking letter at a time. "You've got a steady hand," he commented on the third day, watching as she placed the metal letters into the composing stick. "Most folks get the shakes when they first try it." "I was a schoolteacher," she explained. "Years of writing on chalkboards and grading papers gives one a certain precision." Tucker leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "What made you leave teaching to come here?" Penny paused, considering the question. "Family duty, I suppose. My uncle was my only living relative. When he died, there was no one else to take over the paper." She glanced up at him. "And you, what brought you to Willow Creek?" A shadow crossed his face. "War ended, couldn't go home to Texas, too many ghosts." He said it matter-of-factly, but Penny saw the pain in his eyes. "Your uncle gave me a chance when not many would." Before she could respond, the door swung open and 3 men in expensive suits entered. Penny recognized Harold Blackwell, the bank owner, and his associates from the mining company. "Miss Calloway," Blackwell said, his tone condescending. "We've come to discuss your uncle's outstanding loan." Tucker straightened, his posture suddenly alert. "What loan?" Penny asked, her stomach tightening with dread. Blackwell produced a document. Your uncle borrowed $500 last year. With interest, the amount due is now $650. We'll need payment by the end of the month, or I'm afraid we'll have to take ownership of this establishment. Penny's mind raced. She had savings, but nowhere near that amount. My uncle never mentioned a loan in his letters. It was a private arrangement, Blackwell said smoothly, but legally binding. Tucker stepped forward. Funny, Mr. Blackwell. I worked closely with Mr. Calloway, and he never mentioned needing money. The affairs between a man and his banker are confidential, Mr. Easton, Blackwell replied coldly. Miss Calloway, you have until the end of the month. After they left, Penny sank into a chair, her hands trembling. What am I going to do? I don't have that kind of money. Tucker's jaw was tight. Something doesn't add up. Your uncle was frugal to a fault, never would have taken a loan unless he was desperate, and business was steady last year. Penny looked up at him. You think the loan document is fraudulent? I think Blackwell wants this newspaper, Tucker said grimly. The question is why? That evening, after closing up the office, Tucker insisted on escorting Penny to the small house she'd inherited from her uncle. It's not necessary, she protested. It's only 3 blocks. Humor me, Tucker said, falling into step beside her. Town's been rough lately with the new mining crews coming through. They walked in companionable silence until they passed the town's busiest saloon, the Silver Dollar. A group of well-dressed women stood outside, their faces painted, their dresses revealing. They eyed Tucker appreciatively. Evening, Mr. Easton, one called out. When are you going to stop by and visit properly? Tucker tipped his hat politely but kept walking. Another woman nudged the first. Don't waste your time on him. He's only got eyes for that plain little newspaper woman now. The women laughed, and Penny felt her cheeks burn. She quickened her pace, but not before hearing one final comment. She's too plain for a man like him. No curves, no color, nothing to catch the eye. Tucker caught up to her easily, his long legs matching her hurried steps. Don't pay them any mind, Penny. It's fine, she said stiffly. I'm well aware of my appearance. Tucker stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. In the gathering dusk, his eyes were serious. Those women, they've got paint and powder and fancy dresses, but not one of them has what you have. And what's that? Penny asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Fire in your eyes, strength in your spine, intelligence that makes a man want to be better just to keep up with you. He said it plainly, as if stating an obvious fact. They say you're too plain, then you're perfect for me. I've had my fill of fancy wrappings with nothing worthwhile inside. Penny's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. No man had ever spoken to her like that, as if she were valuable exactly as she was. Tucker, the sound of gunshots from the direction of the newspaper office cut her off. They both turned, and Tucker's expression hardened. Get inside your house and lock the door, he ordered, already starting back the way they'd come. I'm coming with you, Penny said, hurrying after him. It's not safe, it's my newspaper, she said firmly, and I'm not hiding while someone shoots at it. Tucker looked like he wanted to argue but nodded tersely instead. They ran back to the office, finding the front window shattered and a bullet hole in the door. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere, drawers pulled out, contents dumped. The printing press appeared undamaged, but Penny's heart sank when she saw her uncle's desk. The lock had been broken, and everything inside was gone. They were looking for something, Tucker said, surveying the damage. Penny nodded, an awful suspicion forming. My uncle kept all his important documents in that desk, including proof of ownership for the newspaper. Tucker's expression darkened. Blackwell's getting desperate. But why? What's so important about a small-town newspaper? I don't know, Tucker admitted, but we're going to find out. Sheriff Mills arrived a few minutes later, looking tired and irritated. He took minimal notes about the break-in, clearly uninterested. Probably just drunks causing trouble, he said dismissively. Nothing valuable was taken, right? Just all the legal documents for the business, Penny said pointedly. The sheriff shrugged. File a report with my deputy tomorrow if you want. Not much I can do tonight. After he left, Tucker helped Penny clean up the mess. Sheriff's in Blackwell's pocket, he explained. Has been since he took office 3 years ago. So we're on our own, Penny concluded. Tucker looked at her with admiration. You're taking this awfully well for a former schoolteacher. She managed a small smile. My father was a lawyer before he died. He always said that when powerful men start breaking things, it means they're afraid of something. Smart man, Tucker said. Question is, what's Blackwell afraid of? They worked late into the night, putting the office back in order. Tucker insisted on walking Penny home again, and this time she didn't protest. At her door, he paused. I'll sleep on your porch tonight, he said, just to be safe. You most certainly will not, Penny replied. There's a spare room, you can stay there. Tucker looked scandalized. Miss Calloway, your reputation is already in tatters according to the town gossips, she finished for him. And I'd rather risk my reputation than your health sleeping outside in the cold. Besides, after what happened tonight, I'd feel safer with you inside. Something shifted in Tucker's eyes, a warmth, a promise. If you're sure, I am. The next morning, they were awakened by a pounding on the door. Penny hurried to answer it, finding Mrs. Peterson from next door looking scandalized. Penny Calloway. The entire town is talking about you having a man stay the night. What would your poor uncle say? Before Penny could respond, Tucker appeared behind her, looking perfectly respectable in the same clothes from yesterday but with his hair neatly combed. Mrs. Peterson, good morning, he said politely. I'm sure you've heard about the break-in at the newspaper office last night. As Miss Calloway's employee and friend, I felt it my duty to ensure her safety after such a threatening incident. I assure you my presence here was nothing but protective. Mrs. Peterson's outrage deflated somewhat. Well, I suppose that's different, but still, appearances matter, Miss Calloway. Yes, they do, Penny agreed, and I appear to be a woman who values her safety over gossip. Good day, Mrs. Peterson. She closed the door firmly, then turned to find Tucker grinning at her. You're becoming quite the frontier woman, he said admiringly. Necessity, she replied, but couldn't help smiling back. Now, let's figure out what Blackwell is after. They spent the morning at the newspaper office, organizing the upcoming edition while discussing theories about Blackwell's interest. The newspaper's valuable, Tucker mused, but not $600 valuable, especially in a town this size. It must be something else, Penny agreed. Something my uncle knew or had evidence of. Just then, the door opened and a young boy of about 10 rushed in. Mr. Easton, Miss Calloway, you gotta come quick. They're tearing up your uncle's claim. What claim? Penny asked, confused. The boy bounced impatiently. His mining claim. Up by Thunder Creek, Mr. Blackwell's men are there with the sheriff, saying it belongs to the bank now. Penny looked at Tucker in shock. My uncle had a mining claim. Tucker's eyes widened. That old fool, he said, but there was affection in his voice. He was always prospecting on his days off, said journalism was his trade, but finding gold would be his legacy. He grabbed his hat. Let's go. They borrowed horses from the livery and followed the boy, Billy, to a creek about 3 miles outside of town. Sure enough, Blackwell was there with Sheriff Mills and several rough-looking men who were already working with picks and shovels. What is going on here? Penny demanded, dismounting. Blackwell looked surprised to see her but recovered quickly. Miss Calloway. This property was collateral for your uncle's loan. Since you've failed to pay, we're claiming it. The payment isn't due for another 3 weeks, Tucker pointed out, his voice dangerously calm. Given the circumstances, we've accelerated the terms, Blackwell said smoothly. What circumstances would those be? Penny asked. The break-in at my office last night where all my documents were stolen. Sheriff Mills stepped forward. Now, Miss Calloway, there's no need for accusations. Mr. Blackwell has proper documentation. I'm sure he does, Penny said coldly. Freshly forged last night, I'd wager. One of the workers shouted from upstream. Mr. Blackwell, we found it. Blackwell's face lit up, and he hurried to where the man was pointing at something in the creek bed. Penny and Tucker followed. There, gleaming in the sunlight, was a thick vein of gold running through the rock. So that's it, Tucker said quietly. Your uncle found gold and Blackwell wants it. Penny felt a surge of anger. My uncle worked this claim for years. He believed in it when no one else did. And now that it's finally paid off, you think you can steal it? Blackwell turned to her, no longer bothering with pretense. Your uncle was a fool who got lucky. The gold belongs to those who can extract it properly, men with resources and connections. Men like you. Tucker asked, his hand resting casually near his holster. Blackwell smiled thinly. Precisely. Now I suggest you both leave before things get unpleasant. Penny stepped forward. I'm not going anywhere. This claim belongs to me, and I have witnesses who can testify that my uncle never took a loan from you. Your word against mine, Blackwell said dismissively, and in this town my word carries more weight. Perhaps, came a new voice, but mine carries even more. They all turned to see Judge William Parker riding up, accompanied by several men who were clearly federal marshals. Judge Parker, Sheriff Mills said nervously, we weren't expecting you until next week's circuit court. Clearly, the judge said dryly. He dismounted and approached Penny. Miss Calloway, I presume? Your uncle wrote to me last month, expressing concerns about certain parties attempting to claim his property through fraudulent means. He sent me copies of all his legal documents for safekeeping. Penny felt a rush of gratitude for her uncle's foresight. Yes, Your Honor, I'm Penny Calloway. The judge nodded, then turned to Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell, I believe you're in possession of a fraudulent loan document, and based on what I've just witnessed, you're attempting to steal this rightfully claimed property. Blackwell's face had gone pale. This is a simple misunderstanding. Save it for your trial, the judge interrupted. Marshals, take Mr. Blackwell and Sheriff Mills into custody. Charges will include fraud, theft, and abuse of power. As the marshals moved to arrest the men, Penny turned to Tucker, who was watching with undisguised satisfaction. Did you know, she asked. About the gold, he shook his head. Your uncle never told me, but he did mention once that he'd written to Judge Parker about insurance for the future. I figured it was about the newspaper, not a gold claim. The judge approached them again. Miss Calloway, your uncle was a good man and a fine journalist. His last letter indicated that if anything happened to him, the newspaper and this claim would go to you. Thank you, Your Honor, Penny said, still trying to process everything. There's something else, the judge continued. Your uncle mentioned a sealed letter in his desk for you. Did you find it? Penny's heart sank. No, the desk was broken into last night and everything was taken. Tucker cleared his throat. Not everything. Both Penny and the judge looked at him in surprise. Your uncle showed me a hidden compartment in the desk, said it was where he kept his most important treasures. Tucker's eyes met Penny's. We should check there when we get back. That evening, after the excitement had died down and Blackwell and his accomplices were safely locked in the town jail awaiting transfer to the territorial prison, Tucker and Penny returned to the newspaper office. Tucker knelt by the desk, feeling underneath until his fingers found a small lever. He pressed it and a panel slid open, revealing a hidden drawer. Inside was a leather pouch and an envelope with Penny's name on it. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. My dearest niece, she read aloud. If you're reading this, then I have passed on to my reward, and you have inherited my burdens along with my blessings. The newspaper is my heart, but the claim is my future and now yours. I found color in the creek, enough that men like Blackwell have begun circling like vultures. Trust Tucker Easton. He's a good man with a troubled past, but his heart is true, and if an old newsman can offer one last piece of advice, sometimes the plainest truths are the most valuable. Look beyond the surface, just as I did with that stubborn creek that everyone said was worthless. With affection, your Uncle Edward. Penny looked up, tears in her eyes. Tucker was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was right about you, she said softly. Tucker moved closer, taking her hand. And about you. The most valuable things aren't always the ones that shine brightest at first glance. The leather pouch contained gold nuggets, not many, but enough to prove the claim's worth, and the deed to both the newspaper and the mining claim, properly notarized and witnessed. What will you do now? Tucker asked. You're a wealthy woman, or will be once the mine is properly worked. You could sell everything and go back east. Penny considered this, looking around the small office that had become home in such a short time. No, she said finally. I think I'll stay. The newspaper needs me. The town needs a voice that won't be bought or bullied. She hesitated, then added, and I've found reasons to stay that I never expected. Tucker's smile was slow and warm. I was hoping you'd say that. The days that followed were busy ones. Judge Parker appointed a new sheriff, one with no ties to Blackwell or the mining companies. Penny published a special edition of the newspaper detailing Blackwell's schemes and corruption, which sold out 3 printings. And work began at the claim, with Tucker overseeing operations using his experience from before the war. 3 months later, the newspaper was thriving, and the mine had produced enough gold to secure Penny's future. More importantly, she had found her voice as a journalist, championing the causes of the townsfolk who had initially dismissed her. One evening, as they were finishing the weekly edition, Tucker surprised her with a picnic by Willow Creek. "What's the occasion?" Penny asked as he spread a blanket on the grass. 6 months since you arrived," he said, unpacking bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine. Thought it deserved a celebration. They ate as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Tucker seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous. "Is something wrong?" Penny finally asked. He took a deep breath. "No, just thinking about how much has changed." He reached for her hand. "When you first came to town, folks said you were too plain, not like the other women." Penny tensed slightly. "Yes, I remember." "I said you were perfect for me," Tucker continued, his voice growing more confident. "I meant it then, and I mean it more now. Every day I've spent with you has shown me that what others see as plain, I see as extraordinary." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring with a modest diamond set in gold that Penny knew came from her uncle's claim. "Penny Calloway, I'm not a fancy man with elegant words. I'm just a former soldier who found peace working for your uncle and purpose working with you. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day showing you just how perfect you are in my eyes." Tears blurred Penny's vision. "Tucker Easton, are you asking me to marry you?" His smile was tender. "Yes, madam, I believe I am." "Then my answer is yes," she said, her heart overflowing. "Because you're perfect for me too." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close for a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. 2 weeks later, they were married in a simple ceremony at the church, with Judge Parker officiating his circuit court visit to perform the service. The entire town attended, including many who had once whispered about Penny's plainness, but now spoke of her courage and intelligence. As they exchanged vows, Penny wore a simple ivory dress with no frills or elaborate decorations, a dress that suited her perfectly. And when Tucker looked at her, his eyes shining with love and admiration, she knew she'd never need fancy trappings to feel beautiful again. They moved into her uncle's house, expanding it as the mine continued to produce, and the newspaper grew in circulation and influence. Tucker managed the mining operation while helping with the newspaper, and Penny wrote articles that began to be reprinted in papers as far away as Denver and San Francisco. A year after their wedding, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Tucker placed his hand over Penny's slightly rounded belly. "What do you think of Edward for a boy?" he asked. "After your uncle," Penny smiled, covering his hand with her own. "And Elizabeth for a girl after your mother." Tucker nodded, his expression content. "Perfect. You know," Penny said, leaning her head against his shoulder, "sometimes I think about those whispers when I first arrived. She's too plain, they said." Tucker kissed the top of her head. "And I thank God every day they couldn't see what I saw." "What was that?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Everything I ever wanted," he said simply. "Everything I ever needed, nothing plain about that at all." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Penny thought about the journey that had brought her here from a lonely schoolteacher to a respected newspaper owner, from a woman dismissed as plain to one cherished for exactly who she was. The gold mine had brought them security, but it was the treasures of the heart that had made them truly rich. And as Tucker's arm tightened around her, she knew that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories happened to the most ordinary people, if only they had the courage to write their own endings.